Mr. Riddle.
Present.
Mr. McBride. Ms. Hannah.
Yes.
Ms. Callahan Wozniak.
Here.
Ms. Leguizamo. Ms. Gonzalez. President Ewing.
Here, so we do have a quorum. Ms. Gonzalez is in transit. Mr. McBride and Ms. Leguizamo did let me know that they would not be able to join this evening. With that, I'd like a motion to resume open session.
So moved.
Motion by
Second.
Mr. Riddle, second by Ms. Hannah. All in favor signify with aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Ms. Hannah, if you'd be so kind as to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Opportunity for public comment. I guess they forgot the sheet, but I did have Mr. Shinkton who notified that he'd like to speak. Was there anybody else who wanted to address the board after Mr. Shinkton? Ms. Fulton? All right, Mr. Shinkton, if you come on up, if we could get 3 minutes on the screen. As a reminder, you get 3 minutes to address the Board of Education. We ask that you refrain from mentioning student and staff names in your remarks. If you need translation services will be provided to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Whenever you're ready, Mr. Shinkton.
Good evening, everyone. For those who aren't aware, one of our district students had recently passed away through a tragic event. My wife had worked with both her and her brother and had known them very well. So this was a very difficult time for my wife and also her friends at school. So last night, all I could remember is hearing my wife keep saying, we have to try to do something to help this family. So I work in a cigar business, and thankfully a lot of my suppliers have stepped up. So I'm hosting this event at Greentown on the Rocks, where basically if you make a donation, you'll get your value plus in cigars, and there's other items available to donate for, but I'm just trying to help raise money for this family.
What day?
It's it's this Sunday. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Oh my goodness. Okay, I'm sorry. You know what?
Greentown on the
Sunday?
Rock.
Yes, this Sunday.
At the pier, Mr.
I'm
Hunt.
sorry.
That's,
Thank you.
well, I was going to go
know,
put it in my calendar.
quick
I can't.
quick running this. So this is this Sunday at the 7th. I believe it's the 7th.
I'm looking. 7th.
Yes, from 2 to 5 at Greentown on the Rocks. Oh, I'm so sorry.
You're fine.
That's okay.
So please pass the word if you can. I can't imagine losing a child at any age, but at that age. But thank you.
And the good thing about it, I heard before I came here on the news that they did get the
Yeah, they did catch
the
that.
person that did it.
Thank you for that, Mr. Shinkton, and for that reminder. We did receive notification, and I will gladly be in attendance and support any way that I can. All right, whenever you are ready, Ms. Fulton, your time will start.
Good evening, board, community members. I think I was kind of on the line of Mr. Shinkton. All the deaths that have been happening in the community. I would ask you, can we acknowledge that? I had a student that got hit by the ambulance, and the street was dedicated to him, and I was hard pressed to see anybody there in the district. I want to thank Ms. Kelly, who has really been there for us and our former students. That family was big, so we had current students there. People are grieving. I've lost a ton of students while I've been in this district, from killings, from any natural causes, accidents, car accidents, and it seems like we just are not thinking about what's going on with those kids and employees that are working here that have to deal with that. And we're there trying to help every time in the community, and me going to funerals and having to speak most of the time at these funerals is a little difficult, so I would just garner some support with that. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Ms. Fulton. All right. We appreciate both the public comments. With that, we do have our agenda back up. We have 3 items, and then we have our budget meeting. I would be comfortable if we took all the items together. Are there any board members who are opposed?
What items?
A, B, and C, the only 3 items on the agenda, Ms. Anna.
Well, we can, but I do have questions in reference to B.
Then let's take them separate. Motion to approve 8A.
Mr. Riddle, I so move we approve item 8A.
Second.
Second by Ms. Wozniak. Any comments or questions on the motion? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Riddle?
Yes.
Ms. Hannah?
Yes.
Ms. Callahan Wozniak?
Yes.
President Ewing?
Yes, item approved, motion carries. We do have some administrative appointments, if we can go over those at this time.
At this time, I'd like to introduce Mr. Charles E. Scott, who previously served as an education services specialist in Chicago, Illinois. He will now serve as the assistant principal at Clearview Elementary with the starting salary of $74,500. I see Mr. Scott earlier at a PD.
Okay.
Our next appointment is Dr. Rebecca T. Ryan, who previously served as a teacher in Chicago, Illinois. She will now serve as the assistant principal at Robert Abbott Middle School with a starting salary of $74,500. Our next appointment is Miss Ann Zahn, assistant principal, who served as the previous assistant principal at Lyon Elementary. She will now serve as the interim principal at Lyon Elementary at a starting salary of $87,000. Congratulations, Mrs. Zahn.
Thank you, Dr. Zahn.
Do you want to come up? So you stood around even after the PD. Our next appointment is Mr. Timothy Briner, who previously served as a principal. He will now serve as the Division of Operations, Director of Divisions of Operations with a starting salary of Interim Director of Logistics and Compliance with a starting salary of $135,000. Congratulations, Mr. Briner.
All right. Again, thank you and congratulations to those who have been with the district, and welcome to those who will be starting off with District 60. We look forward to your continued efforts. Next up is item 8B, Assistant Director, Coordinator, Academic Chair Level Entitlements.
It is the recommendations of the Operation Division that the Board of Education authorize the superintendent to increase TRS, IMRF, markup, and health contributions equal to director level entitlements for all assistant directors, coordinators, and academic chairs.
Mr. Riddle, I so move we approve the action recommended by the superintendent.
Second.
Any comments, questions on the motion? Ms. Hannah?
Yeah, I know we did this, I don't know if it was a year ago, a couple years ago. We did we took the same action. And I'm just wondering, how did we have the assistant directors, coordinators, and then the academic chairs. What happened to the managers before the academic chairs? And this is the second go around with this, and the managers have been excluded, and I just kind of need to understand the rationale and reasoning behind the exclusion.
Yes, so this is the third time that we brought this before the board. The managers were never included in the package. The package
Right.
was directly tied into the coordinators who have type 75s, along with department chairs who hold 75s. Mr. Moulton, would you like to expound on this any more if I misstated something?
And Superintendent, I appreciate that, and I am fully aware that that the managers were never included. I understand that, but I'm trying to find out the rationale as to why not, because they're hardworking people too, and they hold very vital positions, and the perception, I think, is more important than you know what reasoning that we're gonna get to understand that, because I mean, don't they get IMRF? And if I'm not mistaken, this is also IMRF markup too. And those people get IMRF, and so why can't they be included in markup and as the other people? Because we jumped over the managers and went right to the academic chairs, and I don't understand that.
I think when you look at the hierarchy, I would say it's directors, assistant directors, coordinators, academic chairs, and then managers. And I did say that they have a type 75, and you can expound on that. And this is not about who works harder, who doesn't, who's valued, who's not. It's staying in the practice of the certification that we looked at previously. And so I'll let Mr. Moulton answer more if I misrepresented anything, but I do hear you, and it's something that we can look at, but tonight's vote is exactly for what is written on tonight's paper. We would need to assess this even more.
Right, and one more thing, Superintendent, we hired the people to be assessing salaries and positions and all of that, and have we gotten any kind of recommendation or data back as to their findings through their assessments regarding salaries and all of that stuff for our staff, before we do this? Or is this a part of the recommendation?
So this is in line with past practice and what we previously have done. So when we gave all this information over to the salary study, their salaries were based off what we're doing tonight. And if I'm incorrect, you can let me know, Mr. Moulton. And I just want to completely answer your question. Yes, I have received updates. The team does have meetings with them. I've seen a number of reports. Actually based our new principal salary off the recommendations that are coming out of the report, and the board will be seeing that soon. We have been off the month of July. We are just coming back, so I hope to solidify that in August.
Right, and okay.
So, and this is slightly different, and correct me if I'm wrong, Deputy Moulton and Ms. Polk, in that we would be making these entitlements permanent. No.
So, good evening, Board President, Board members, Superintendent. So we would be modifying these entitlements until we get the recommendations from our compensation study by Morgan HR. What we are anticipating is that as this is part of the conversation, they have advised that we maintain status quo on how we handle compensation until we're able to take their final recommendations and implement them. So there is a sentence on the agenda item, I believe it's the second sentence under public content, that clarifies that for you. But at this time, we are proposing extending this and making the contributions on behalf of the employees for their IMR FTRS as well as medical benefit.
Well, I just want to make it noted for the record that that I cannot support this because of the exclusion of a group of individuals that should be in this item as also.
Thank you, Ms. Hannah, and I'm sure that be noted for the record. My clarification comes to underneath the recommended action where it states for an indefinite extension. And so indefinite to me means permanent, right? Or am I no? I'm confused by that
Mrs. Polk,
terminology.
can you please? Oh, Mr. Moulton got it. Okay.
can-
I just see her.
Yeah, we can help clarify. So we do have a compensation study taking place.
Correct.
So as these funds are considered compensation for these employees, we want to make sure that the action we take this evening mirrors and is taken into consideration with Morgan HR's work. So we do understand we're talking about compensation, but the difference that this action would take would be the difference between somebody possibly making $50,000 and $60,000. So we're considering that in the compensation study. It just may look different and the terminology may be different without negatively impacting the employee once we provide the recommendations of that study. But right now, how we're currently compensating staff in these 3 job classifications, this is considered a markup that the district is providing as a benefit financially for the individuals within these job classifications, as opposed to just simply on their base salary.
So why do you all exclude the managers?
So, Ms. Hannah, the superintendent did provide feedback on that, but these groups of employees are the same groups of employees that we brought forward the last 3 years.
I know
We did
that.
not modify that.
But I asked the question, why are we excluding the managers?
We are not excluding the managers. We have never included the managers in this benefit. We are reactivating the benefits that this group held previously. And as I stated, we will look into the managers, but that is not what is on the table at this time. So I will look into that and come back to the board. But we're also looking at certification levels within this group, etc.
Yeah. And I would just say, Board President, I support this based on the fact that, as Mr. Moulton said, it's highlighted in there that there's going to be further discussions after the contracted salary review is concluded. So we're doing the same thing we did last year and the previous year by approving this, and that makes perfect sense to me, and that was the review committee that advised this, so I support this action. Not to change it, just to do it exactly what we did last year. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, and this is so. I know this was one that we had supported previously. It was supposed to be for 1 year, and we rolled it over. Was it 2 years or 3 years? Right. This is the third year.
Yes, this is third.
And one of the things that we talked about was making them permanent, is because I know we heard a lot of feedback is for individuals it resulted in a pay cut when we let these things expire. So I think Ms. Hannah's point about what can we do for the managers will be looked into in the overall compensation study. It's because if anything comes back and there are recommendations that come from that for the managers, you can do it. But why you guys are bringing this back is due to the financial impact that it had, but also based on the recommendation that we shouldn't be making changes to compensation while it's undergoing the review. Is that clear? Or
That is correct, Mr.
Okay.
Ewing. Thank you.
yes. So what? What I would say is that we do need to amend the motion. Is where it's written now is that we would, in my opinion, we would be making these compensations permanent. And I know it's just temporary in phrasing, but what I would like it to say, if we can amend the motion, the only person that can amend would be, I guess you'd have to withdraw your motions, and then
I think Rick.
I can make a new motion. Who made it? You have to withdraw it.
Rick,
Okay, I made it.
withdraw my
Okay, so
second.
or can I just amend it? Or don't I have to withdraw it first?
You could withdraw it or amend it.
You can withdraw it or amend it. Withdraw
I'll just amend it to say temporary. in-
pending the result.
Pending the
of
results
the
of our
report
review
from our
committee.
HR,
Right.
HR consultant.
Of HR report.
Yep.
And I'll second that.
So we want a motion to, do we need a motion to amend it that this would be temporary basis pending the report from our HR consultant? All right? That's the motion.
Yes. That's the
Yes.
motion.
So we got a first and a second. Any comments or questions on the motion? Roll call vote, please.
Ms. Gonzalez,
Yes.
Mr. Riddle,
Yes.
Ms. Tanner,
We're just amending the motion, right?
No, we're voting on it.
The motion, he made a new motion.
So this is the official vote
The vote for this.
to approve it with the amended language.
Oh, okay. No.
Ms. Callahan Wozniak,
Yes.
President Ewing.
Yes. Item approved, motion carries. We are now at item 8C, attendance at 2022 ILS conference.
It is recommended the Board of Education approve the attendance of one employee, one board member listed below to the 2022 National Association of Latino Administrators and Superintendents ALAS Education Summit in San Juan, Puerto Rico from October 5th through the 7th at an estimated cost of $2,800 per person for a total cost of $5,600. Cost includes airfare, lodging, travel, registration fees, and per diem.
Do we have a motion?
I'm gonna make a motion that we approve it as presented.
Motion by Ms. Hannah.
Yeah, all that
Second.
No good. Thank you, Mr. Thank you.
Any comments or questions on the motion?
I thought we had already voted for Miss Hannah to go.
I thought so too.
Not officially. So, again, we had said that we didn't have an issue with her attending.
Okay. All right.
But we did not take an
discussed it.
official
We
vote.
didn't- We didn't vote on it. Okay.
Okay.
All right, that's good.
All right. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Riddle,
Yes.
Ms. Hannah, Ms. Callahan
No,
Wozniak,
if I can.
Yes.
For that, can
Mr. Ewing.
I can't vote.
Yes. And Ms. Hannah, are you going to be a pass?
Pass.
I'll abstain.
Abstain.
All right. Abstained by Ms. Hannah. Motion carries. Item is approved. With that, I would like for a motion to adjourn.
So
So
moved.
moved. Second.
Motion by Mr. Riddle, second by Ms. Wozniak. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Meeting is adjourned. I'm going to say just take a 4-minute break for bathroom, and then we're going to run through starting at 6:30 our budget meeting. So thank you.
He's only $20 a day. He's going to get a bag worth at least 20.
Our budget workshop number 3. If I can have a roll call, please.
Mr. Riddle,
Present?
Mr. McBride, Ms. Hannah, Ms. Callahan Wozniak,
Here.
Ms. Leguizamo, Ms. Gonzalez,
Here.
and President Ewing.
Here. So, item 3A, approval of the meeting minutes of fiscal year 23, budget number 1, and budget number 2 workshops.
Mr. Riddle, motion to approve the minutes as represented.
Motion by Mr. Riddle,
Second.
second by Ms. Wozniak. Any comments or questions on the motion? All in favor signify with aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Minutes are approved. All right, reports and presentations. I will turn it over to Ms. Polk.
Good evening, Board of Education. Colleagues and community, we're here for our 3rd budget workshop, which is what we've done over the past few years for transparency purposes. Staff is going to present the information to you tonight, and of course, we're available to answer whatever questions you may have. Mr. Lattimore.
Start with Mr. Projections first. Okay. Good evening, Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen of the board, Superintendent Vicencia, and our colleagues here, and the viewing public. Next few minutes, we're going to have our 3rd budget workshop. We have some refined information. We have some new information. First, we have Eric. You're going to do your budget projections? Is that correct? Yes.
So you see the enrollment projections for the coming year. The elementary is slated to go up slightly. We've been having a lot of 1st and 2nd graders enroll in the district this summer because they did not come in kindergarten, with the pandemic, and they are coming through. So in addition to our kindergarten, we are seeing an uptick in 1st and 2nd grade students that unfortunately have been staying home and are now coming back to us. Middle school, I see a decrease because that's where the pathway is going, and high school is staying about even. So any questions on some of these numbers?
The pre-K, why are they up so much?
Pre-K is a grant-funded program, and they've got certain numbers that they're supposed to hit. So every year on here, I put the number they're supposed to hit on here.
Okay.
And of course, for these past few years with the pandemic, they have not hit those numbers, but that's with the pandemic, the remote learning and things along those lines. So
Have we had a lot of people sign up, or more people?
they
Children?
did a lot of screenings in the spring. So I know in March, April, and May they did a lot of screenings. They did a few screenings over the summer. So they've done more screenings these past 5 months than they normally do. So I don't have their exact figures with me, but they are on their way.
Only question with that goes to, just very briefly, going off their preschool program, there are requirements to participate in the free preschool, in the preschool program. So we could hit 600, but if students don't qualify, are other people who don't meet the criteria able to then request seats?
So with that, there are criteria to rank the students to go in, and then they get put on a waiting list once they hit their capacity. The capacity is much, much more than 600. I believe the grant, I don't know the exact number, so I'm not going to say it. But the grant is well over 600 for that. I just put 600 as a number that they would hit by October 1st. And these past 4 years or so, they've not had a waiting list because their numbers have been down. So when they get up to over the 600 number, they're going to have to start with a waiting list to make sure they have enough space for qualified students in the spring.
Thank you.
I also
I have a question too.
Oh,
Ms. Gonzalez?
and I know I've been bugging Mr. Christensen several times this past month, but when a student is registered, that counts as their enrollment, correct? Or is it not technically? Like
Yes.
registration. And when they're registered, do they know then and there what school they're going to?
So there's returning student registration and new student registration. So returning student registration, we have them all enrolled, and we count them all as enrolled. They're all parts of these numbers. We are expecting all of them to come back. They would have to tell us for us to drop them and take them off the rolls. So they're all in there.
Okay.
So students get that notification in the spring to register in the school that they'll be at for the following year. New student registration goes through the Welcome Center. They'll come through. We are still having a hybrid. Some do it all entirely online, submit forms through email. We still have some that we don't see face to face. And then we also have ones that come in face to face.
Okay. And the
When
last,
they have all their things in and done, we give them a call. We notify them saying, this is the school that you'll be starting at.
okay. And then last question. Sorry. Is there still an opportunity to register the student late for parents who still haven't registered their students?
Yes, so returning students, we are expecting everybody to be here on August 11th. Please go to school on August 11th. The secretaries are in the building. We are asking that you update your telephone numbers, update your contact information, update who the emergency contact is, and submit a health questionnaire. And that's what registration is for most students. They can do that with the secretary this week, the beginning of next week.
Okay.
After school starts that next week or so, still go in and get that updated.
Okay.
6th and 9th graders need to supply 2 proofs of residency. When they go into middle school, we go into high school, we want to just double check residency.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Welcome.
And Mr. Christensen, my question, 2 questions on pre-kindergarten. What efforts are we making to increase that? Do we find that we have more parents wanting to get into the, morning and we don't have enough space? So and some of them don't want to do the afternoon. And have we looked at possibility of the all-day kindergarten to increase our numbers because we've got the grant money?
So the pre-K has a new coordinator that just started this summer, and I'm not exactly sure what her new priorities are. They fall under teaching and learning. So I can just speak in generalities that AM does definitely fill up first, and it is difficult to fill in that PM spot, and they have to do some balancing and some advertising and reassuring the parents that it's not going to destroy nap time to have pre-K in the afternoon and to get that worked out.
Yeah.
So I am sure that they're looking at things, and we'll be ramping up efforts across the board.
Okay, and then along with that encouragement, have we worked with United Way in their Success by 6 program to try to get, to get these kids, to help us get more of this parents and let them know how important this pre-K is, that it's really the start, that these kids need to be in pre-K, so they'll be ahead when they get to kindergarten.
I'm more familiar with the United Way, the Success by 6, when they were, into kindergarten, and getting that age, and they do wonderful workshops and wonderful things for that. And I'm sure they're working with them. I don't know exactly what they're doing on that side. The all-day pre-K, I think that's additional grant. I think our grant funding is a half-day pre-K. Full-day pre-K would be other grant opportunities.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Christensen. Ladies and gentlemen, for the next few minutes, myself and Mr. Luosa will be scaffolding you across the 23 budget. Then we'll be followed up by Mr. Chan, who will give you some additional comments related to the ESSER program, ESSER 3 specifically. Next slide, please. Here's where we start. Our superintendent is committed towards an equitable education. Operative word, equitable, to meet the individual needs of our students. Next slide. We've embraced a strategic budget process. We no longer roll over the budget and add in a slight inflation factor. We look at the needs of the individual students. We capture that through school improvement plans, bubbled up in terms of requests from our principals and our departments. But we embrace 4 basic tenets. Transparency. We want people to see what we are doing at all levels, our community, and we'll speak about that a little bit later on. Our principals, our students are even involved in the process, and our staff. Equity. We've seen the chart a number of times. Not everybody gets equal. We need to meet the individualized needs of our students. Sustainability. We just can't look 1 year in the future. What we do has to last over time. So that's why sustainability is extremely important and embraced in our process. And finally, return on investment. We progress monitor. What we are doing, is it working? We do it instructionally, we also do it financially. As a reminder, about 73%, 75% of our budget is personnel. So we have to also monitor how we are spending our dollars and can we sustain that over time. Next slide, please. Our goals. To the left of this chart, you will see what we embrace as a district. Research-based teaching philosophies. We've inherently put into our systems at all levels diversity, equity, and inclusion, equaling what we believe to be student success. From the business office, our goals are to keep a stabilized budget. If the budget is stable, the instructional and operational sides of our house can produce what they need to produce over time in a stair-step fashion, not whimsically, but methodically. Fund strategic priorities. What is our need? We don't just take dollars, we look at what is need and assign resources to it in a cognitive, eyes open, deliberate fashion. And consistency in terms of our policies and procedures. So how we are working will assist us as a business office as well as the district overall to get where we need to go. Those factors combined produce what we believe will be measurable student outcomes that are successful. Next slide, please. I had a comment I put on this as I was looking at the slides. As we end, we begin. We basically do 2 school years every year. We end 1 year and we begin anew. We provide for our schools and our departments a game plan so that they are aware of milestones that are critically important as we go across this timeline. You can see there, we notify the schools in November, closeout procedures. What needs to happen at the end of the school year in June. And now, we'll not read the slide to you, you've seen it before, but we build in transparency for budget workshops so that our community, you as board members, staff, faculty, everybody's aware of what's going on. At the end of this process, tonight, we will put notice in the newspaper so that a wider audience, if you haven't seen it through our television feed, will be able to see it in the newspaper and be able to come to the district office and examine our budget. Also, this will end in the end process with you adopting the budget in mid-September, approximately 30 days from today. Next slide, please. Why are we here? This is the 3rd workshop. The workshops exist to engage and solicit input from all our constituents for this year. And for each year, we go through the budget process. For the last 7 or 8 years, we've gone to strategic budgeting. I'd like to bring your attention to the little box on the left-hand side. Please note the highlighted section. The emphasis being the ultimate goal to positively affect student achievement. That's what we're about, to provide the resources to improve student achievement. Next slide, please. We've had the opportunity to share with all of our stakeholders. One of the major events that we're very proud of is our Strategic Budget Committee. We had Mr. Marvin Bembry for the 3rd year as our facilitator, and you can see the members who participated there in the 3rd paragraph. We had 2 board members, fortunately, Ms. Hannah, Ms. Leguizamo, our district leadership, our superintendent, principals. grant managers, parents, I even had students. It's a great experience. But again, the end aim being transparency. To get a different perspective, to give us concepts or ideas that we may not have thought of to consider. Next slide, please. We really like this slide. Our business office, you see the little cogs, notice how they mesh together. Collaboration, because we can't do it in a vacuum. We have to have conversations, meaningful conversations with our stakeholders, as well as our instructional and operational counterparts. Prioritization, they have to interlock. What are we doing and why are we doing it? And as I mentioned before, sustainability. We don't want to do it 1 year and pull it away. We want to do it for a longer haul, assuming it is effective. And that's why we do a lot of progress management. Next slide, please. Again, different words. You see our 4 principles. Solvency, because we do not want the district to be financially having problems. Compliance, we have a number of grants. We want to make sure we comply with state and federal mandates. Transparency, say it again. We want everyone to see what we're doing. We don't want any surprises. We want to consider everyone's input. We may not necessarily agree, but once we've come to the conclusion of where we're going, we want everybody on the train going in the same direction. Inclusivity, again, very transparent. Equity, what meets the need? Providing resources to meet the need. And needs focused. Think in terms of consistency over the long haul. Now let's get a little bit into the numbers. Next slide, please. You'll notice on this slide for 21 and 20, the taxes for the district. You'll note no increase. We followed your guidance. Actually, we saved $6.11. We took it down to as many digits as we could, as tight as we could get it. I'd like to bring to your attention our EAV is going up, the property value for our school district went up about 8%. We assumed we get about 98% collection on what we've levied, and this year we had a windfall from the state. We got $379,000 from the state that we were not expecting, that were provided to the district. So that was a windfall. We did not levy for that. That was provided to us by the state. Again, notice no tax increase. Next slide. This document is published at the Lake County Tax Assessor's Office for the community to review. You can again see the extension. Again, I'll note on the right-hand side, that colored bar there, you see the $379,000 windfall from the state of Illinois. Again, we did not tax for that or levy for that. So the our public was not inconvenienced in any fashion. Next slide. There should be one in front of that.
We did, good evening, everyone. We did add a slide to the presentation that we will share after this meeting. We're able to immediately. That's what Mr. Lattimore was referring to. We did categorize the budget requests by strategic initiative investments per request from the board president. And I can speak to this again. I apologize that we don't have the visual up immediately for your viewing. But we will provide this immediately afterward. We broke down the budget requests into categories, primarily different ASAP, academic and support program division requests, such as computers, technology, personnel requests, professional development, tutors, counseling, etc. We also broke them out into the general support service areas such as business, legal, transportation, food service, etc., inclusive of the Board of Education budget request value. And so I would like to, again, just speak on this for now, that going basically from the top down, from where the money is being directed mostly. Of a total of approximately 146 million in non-salary, non-benefits budget requests, we have approximately 23.6 million of computers and associated technology being requested on the ASAP side. We have approximately 20,700,000 of capital projects being requested on the operations side. We have about 16.7 million of supplemental services and materials being requested by ASAP, approximately 14.5 million of transportation, approximately 12.3 million in ASAP general operating expenses, 9.6 million on the business, under the business and finance office, 9.6 million under food services, 6.3 million under just operations, Fund 20, and it will go on down. You'll see that. We will provide that in detail. I would like to note that again, this was at the request of the board to break it out by category, and that this is our attempt to do so.
But I do want to emphasize public relations, which is one of the areas that the board president is interested in, which would be inclusive of phase and also outreach.
850,000.
Yes, so ASAP public relations would be about 815,000. And I thank you, Ms. Vulcan. I'm aware that college and career readiness is also a area of interest, and that is at 918,000. So this, we will provide this information immediately afterwards.
Thank you, Mr. Chen. Looking from any questions on that, we have a lot of categories we put together. And I believe that they will be self-explanatory once you see them, like testing and assessment, curricular mapping, tutoring, counseling, things of that nature. You'll be able to see the amounts associated with that. Taking a larger, higher view, if you would, we have there what the district looks like in terms of its revenue. Approximately 55% of revenue is state-driven. And the programs you see there are evidence-based learning funding, early childhood and special education. We have approximately 15% coming from local sources, which are property tax and CCPRT, commercial taxing. And then you have approximately 30%, which is about 78 million, coming from federal sources, such as the school lunch program, Title I, IDEA flow-through, Medicare, and the ESSER. As I indicated earlier, Mr. Chan will be walking through the ESSER program for you to give you an overview as to expenditures and revenues to date on that. So with that, I'm going to transition, unless there are any questions, to Mr. Lowosa, who will give you perspective on the budget in terms of function, object, as well as source. Not seeing any. Mr. Lowosa.
Thank you, Mr. Lattimore. The next slide should show the operating fund projected fund balance. These are the operating funds: education fund, operations and maintenance, transportation, and working cash. These are the four funds that the state basically gives us our financial profile score. So we've split them out on just one page for financial profile scores and a separate page for all others. So going through the education fund, projected beginning fund balance July 1st, 22 of 41 million. We're noting revenues of 259 million, which was the preceding pie chart broken down between federal, state, and local. We got projected expenditures of 263 million, so we're going to show a little deficit of about 3.8 million for the year in the ed fund. That's going to reduce the fund balance from 41 million down to 37 million. at the end of June of 2023. Operations and maintenance, which is Fund 20, beginning fund balance of $8.5 million. We got projected revenues of 7.5, almost 7.6 million. Projected expenditures 13. Deficit for the projected deficit of 5.4 million, and ending fund balance projected at $3,099,000. Transportation fund, beginning fund balance 6.1 million. We have a revenues of 13 million, expenditures of 15 million, projected deficit in that transportation fund of 1.9 million. Ending fund balance approximately 4.2 million for Fund 40. Working cash, beginning fund balance 27 million, $210,000 projected revenues, and ending fund balance 27.8 million. The total of those four funds, beginning balance is 83 million, 280 million for revenues, 291 million for projected expenditures. That creates a projected deficit of 11.1 million, bringing the projected fund balance down for these operating funds of $72.4 million. Going to the next slide, we have other funds, projected fund balance. The other funds are noted there. Debt service, Fund 30, IMRF, Social Security, Fund 50, capital projects, tort, and life safety. We have, going to the total column, we've got a beginning fund balance of negative 1,780,000, projected revenues of 21,806,000, projected expenditures 40 million, and proposed deficit of 18.6 million in these funds. Projected fund balance at the end of June of 2023, negative 20,444,000. As you can, and the next screen basically notes the summary of the last two screens. So we've got 83 million for the operating funds, going down to a projected fund balance of 72 million. We got the other funds, starting fund balance of negative 1,780,000, going to a projected fund balance of negative 20,444,000. And overall, projected fund balance as of July 1st, 2022, starting 81.8 million, ending June of 2023, fund balance of 52 million. So deficit, we're showing a deficit for the year for about 29.8 million, almost $30 million. Going to the next screen, we're going to break down the expenditures by fund and object. So you'll see going down, we'll have salaries, employee benefits, purchase services, etc. And going across, we'll have basically the totals of those salaries and benefits. And if you look at the far right-hand side, we'll have totals by object. Salaries, 152.5 million. Benefits, 32.8 million. Purchase services, 66.8 million. Supplies, 25.8 million. Capital outlay, 25.6. Other objects, 26 million. And non-cap equipment, 2.6 million. Total expenditures, 332,351,000. Looking at it from another vantage point, by fund and function, we have instruction at 157,547,000 across all funds. Support services, 164 million. Community services, 2.2 million. Payments to other districts, 91,000. Debt services, 4.6 million. And provisions for contingencies, 3.5 million. So as a percent to total, instruction is 47.4%. And support services, 49.4%. All right, I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. Chin, and he'll talk about the comparability report.
Thank you. So, if you could keep that one up, please. Thank you. So we bring this to everyone's attention, this Title I comparability documentation requirement, because it impacts how the district must must cover the budget requests from across the district, not in terms of the nature or the type of the costs, but in terms of the source of funds that is to cover all of the costs that are being proposed. So basically, this comparability requirement, in this context, the word comparability, think of it as meaning equivalent. So the ISB wants, the federal government wants to see that school districts are providing comparable resource distribution across all of their school sites. And comparable in this case meaning equivalent. So, and this is specifically in reference to state and local funds. They want to see state and local funds being equivalently distributed across each school. And so there are a couple of methodologies to utilize to calculate this comparability. The method that we use here is the expenditure per pupil. Okay, so we want to see the expenditure per pupil amount be within plus or minus 10% of schools of comparable size and grade span. So, for example, the elementary schools that are serving K-5, right, they have to have a per pupil expenditure amount that is within plus or minus 10% of one another within that grade span and within those schools of comparable size. Same with the middle schools, and same with our schools that are marked as serving pre-K through 5. Interestingly enough, if there are any standalone sites, such as the high school, such as the Early Learning Center, you can't compare them to any other school in the district because that's the only high school. That's the only standalone pre-K. So those schools are exempt from this requirement. And then the only other one would be Glenwood, because it's so much bigger than all of the other elementary schools. So remember I said it was comparable grade span and size in terms of the number of kids enrolled. So this requirement, what it means is that if there is a, for lack of a better word, if there's a variance in the amount of state and local funds being directed towards these schools within these comparable groups, and it's outside of this range of being plus or minus 10% per pupil, then we have to make an adjustment. And what we are able to do is we are able to adjust federal dollars to those schools that are maybe too high, or how should I say this, that are outside of the range of comparability, I'll say. We can use federal dollars to make these adjustments to then satisfy this requirement under Title I. So this documentation we need to provide to ISB by November 30th annually. When we do this comparison, as we will pull up shortly on this spreadsheet that's linked within this slide, you'll see the numbers behind our calculation. You'll notice when we get into the spreadsheet that not all items are included in the calculation, and that's per the instructions that are given to us via ISB. So we exclude salary benefits, and we also include capital projects, Fund 30, Fund 60, Fund 90. We exclude those items. So Lee, if you could please click on that and bring up the spreadsheet. Yeah.
Say something and then you can move forward. Because we have ESSER money, there's a lot of reporting requirements that we have. We have this report, which is a comparability report, which, like Mr. Chen said, is based upon equal funding. And so they gave us the ESSER money so that we could subsidize what we're supporting financially through local and state. But then also, Mr. Chen was going to mention, we have to submit the Mo Equity report of which last year, that means that they want us to be, have equity across all of our schools. So in one report, we have to be equal, and in one report, we have to have equity, right? So we have to really manage how we're budgeting the money and how we're reporting it. And so last year, legislation had it such that we were able to request an exemption. And so legislation has also extended one more year. And so with the concurrence of the board and the superintendent, we intend to submit another exemption on the basis of instability of enrollment, and also the state not letting us know what we're getting in state aid by the time we have to adopt the budget. So we intend to submit that exemption again. The third report that is also required, and we've normally presented to the Board of Education at Budget Workshop 3, is the per pupil expenditures. But because we're having all of these other reports and they're closely linked together, we did the comparability because we thought that it was important for you to see that information because it's clearly tied to ESSER, right? And so Mr. Chen is also going to brief you on the status of ESSER. Any questions about all of those reports that we have to do?
Thank you, Ms. Polk. Okay, so we have the calculation spreadsheet up on the monitors. You will, in the first column, column A, you'll see the grade spans. In the second column, column B, you'll see the schools. And remember, I said the schools have to be determined as comparable between like schools. So those are the groupings. As we move from left to right, starting in, I can't see it from here, but where it says direct costs, those direct costs, starting with object 300, 400, and 600, those are the direct costs that are attributable by location code. So per school, okay, direct costs per school. Object 300 is purchase services, 400 is materials, and 600 is other objects. So we have that as a base. However, we also know that we have central office expenditures that are for the schools. So we have to take that central office amount and then prorate that across these schools to make sure that we're accounting for that. So Lee, if you could scroll to the right, just a few more columns. Yep, you'll see the indirect cost to prorate. So those amounts underneath where it says indirect cost to prorate, those are central office costs that go towards providing services to schools. So then we have to prorate these amounts out by school. We take the enrollment per school and divide it by the total enrollment for the district, and we get a percentage. We multiply that percentage by the amount to prorate of those costs. We add both of those together. We get a total. So Lee, if you want to scroll to the right a little bit further. So we'll see that percentage to apply. Again, that's the... Yes, that's the that percentage to apply is that school enrollment divided by the total district enrollment. We multiply that by the cost to prorate, and then we get the prorated costs out to the right. We add that prorated cost to the direct costs for each school, and we get our total that we work with for this documentation purpose. We divide that by the enrollment of the school, and we get a per pupil amount. So that per pupil amount, if it is not within the range of comparability of that plus or minus 10% of those schools within that group, then we have to make adjustments, right? And we're only taking into consideration these state and local funds under these object codes. The adjustments you'll see, yep, thanks, Lee. The adjustments you will see as a minus. Yep, keep a few more columns over, Lee, thank you. So the adjustments you'll see as a reduction of state and local funds being directed to that school, and that adjustment in this case is being taken on by the ESSER 3 grant, which we're going to get to in a minute. So those costs for those school sites, that reduction, it's not a reduction in what they're getting, it's just a changing of the source of funds that will cover those budget requests from those schools to satisfy this comparability requirement under Title I. So I know that was very exciting. So does anyone have any, and it's in, as Ms. Polk said, it's in concert with all of these other requirements, some of which are, I mean, basically they're in conflict with one another. So it's quite a puzzle to work on financially. Any questions so far?
Ms. Wozniak?
This chart, how do we get to this how do we get to this chart? Can you share that with us?
Yeah, so in the PowerPoint, where it's the cartoon of the guy pointing at the chalkboard, there is a link embedded in that image. So
it says, hold it. I'm a Mac person.
Okay.
I don't have a left mouse.
Well, I'm a PC, I don't know. So there is a link embedded in there. I know that if I, either click on it or if I right click and like pull out the hyperlink and then paste it into my browser address bar, I can, it's in there. But we can send it separately, of course, as well. Yeah, we can share it, of course. Okay, so with that said, it's a good segue. It's a good segue into this.
I'm sorry, I had another question back a couple of slides. Are we at all concerned that the projected fund ending balance for other funds is a negative 20 million?
Negative 30.
No, we're not, because based upon the ISB document, if you were to look at it, it says that we're not balanced, but we do not need a deficit reduction plan. Anytime you look at that document and it requires a deficit reduction plan, we have problems, right? So, but we would never make a recommendation to the superintendent or the Board of Education that would put the district in that position. Also, oftentimes, over the years, you've heard me say that we have the budget request that we're managing, and also we're tracking what the actuals are so that we can make sure that we're not overspending. One of the things also that I wanted to point out to you, that we gave you the projected fund balance. We did not give you the projected cash balance, okay? Those are two different things, because the fund balance, you could have a negative. The cash balance, you cannot, right? You can't spend what you don't have. So that $20 million in the non-operating funds is really being covered on the cash side by our working cash fund. So if you were to look at that budget document, you'll see that our working cash balance is projected to be something, with loans, it's projected to be something like $4 million, which we won't ever get there. No, because we're going from $27 million down to, right, that $4 million. So that's based upon estimates, projections. But we're constantly monitoring where we are financially. We're constantly providing to the superintendent and the Board of Education. Right now, it's not a concern of ours at all, because if you look at that document, no deficit reduction plan is required. Did that help?
No, I just want the public to know.
Yeah, I know you saw it, yeah.
Negative 20 million's not an issue.
No.
Okay, so this is, as I said, the adjustments are being put into the ESSER 3 grant for FY23, so this is a good segue into the next portion of the presentation, which would be the American Rescue Plan status update slide deck. I think it says ESSER 3 update or something like that. Yep. Okay, so the purpose of this portion of the presentation is to provide an update about the status of the ESSER 3 grant. Next slide, please. So the background, the ESSER funds, they have been provided by the federal government to school districts for the purpose of responding to the COVID-19 pandemic and the adverse impact that it has had and continues to have on schools, students, families, communities across the nation. The eligible reimbursement period for the ESSER 3 grant in particular is March 13th, 2020 to September 30th, 2024. The allotment of ESSER 3 funds to Waukegan is $50,586,354. I'd like to go over some of the highlights, some of the accomplishments of the Waukegan School District since the onset of the pandemic. There have been many things that really are to be proud of. So some of the steps that we've taken to mitigate COVID and ensure a safe return to in-person learning would be that we've hosted vaccine clinics. We are implementing contact tracing and related protocols. We've provided personal protective equipment in the form of masks, acrylic dividers in schools, and improved sanitation efforts. During the shutdown, when we were in full remote learning mode, information technology provided an improvement to the main distribution frame, providing a more robust internet and network infrastructure throughout the district for staff and students to handle that increased load on the system. We've provided one-to-one student tech devices such as Chromebooks and iPads, etc. And of course, there were Wi-Fi hotspots provided to members of the community and family to ensure that they would be able to access the remote learning curriculum during full remote learning. We provided meal distribution during the shutdown. Of course, we had to improve the curriculum to kind of work through the uniqueness of remote learning. And of course, there was no workforce reduction during that period of time. And we also had employee phone and internet reimbursements processed so that people could work from home. Continuing on, from ESSER 3 specifically, whole system HVAC upgrades have been undertaken at several schools across the district. Roofing removal and replacement, window sealing and floor replacement, and associated asbestos remediation, all with the intent of mitigating the spread of COVID-19 by improving indoor air quality and by also attempting to optimize in-person learning environments so that upon return to in-person learning, students would have safe, comfortable, healthy places to learn. Upon our return to in-person learning, we did recognize that students were in need of additional social and emotional supports. Some examples of this include contracting with Youth Guidance and Asian Human Services and providing tutoring through our own WPS educators and through Varsity Tutors, TutorMate, and paper tutoring. Summer school was provided each summer, and we also provided additional co-curricular activities in recognition of the need of our students to have increased in-person contact outside of just the regular education setting. Continuing on, of course, professional development has been underway and continues to train our staff to handle the return to in-person learning and the COVID slide and the associated challenges with reacclimating to in-person learning. Many school site-based planning committees have been convened to address these same issues. We've had a couple of teacher supply programs where teachers were offered at the district's cost supplementary instructional supplies to support the needs of their students in their classrooms. And of course, we had a retention incentive paid out at the end of last fiscal year as of June 30th. And we also continue to waive student fees. We've done that for a few years in a row. Currently, you will have seen on the district website that we did solicit input from all stakeholders regarding the status of ESSER 3 plans. I would like to say too that the ESSER 3 plan, I mean, it's a plan. It's always a district plan. Like instead of having all these separate plans, it's always a singular district plan that it all feeds up into. However, it is a requirement to have this 6-month review. So we did solicit input. The first link will take you to the survey page. Now that survey is closed now, of course, because it was back in July. And then the second link will take you to the compiled survey results. And so here on this sheet, you will see all of the results from the respondents. Now, leadership has taken this feedback and has incorporated it into their plans for FY23. So we can go to the next slide, Lee. Thank you. But before we get into those FY23 plans, I'll just recap. Through June 30th, which would be the last day of the previous fiscal year, FY22, a total of $20,165,115 has been expensed under the ESSER 3 grant. $13.3 million of this has been to address learning loss. $6.7 million has been to implement those capital improvement projects that I spoke about previously. The next slide shows a breakdown of that, what was it, $20 million. So you can see some of the highlights would be the employee retention incentive, salaries and benefits. So far, that's totaled $2.19 million, and then so on and so forth. You can see it for yourselves. There is a link in the bottom right-hand corner that will take you to the fine detail of what constitutes these expenditures. So, Lee, if you could click on that link, please. So there are a few tabs here. On the first tab is a summary, again by learning loss, capital improvements, and PPE. We did buy masks out of the grant. And actually, on the second tab, I do have this printed out. Sorry. On the second tab, those are all the costs related to addressing learning loss that have been incurred through June 30th, 2020. On the third tab is the PPE costs and where we bought those things from and how much they cost us. The fourth tab is capital improvements. You'll see that, again, that went towards the roofing and replacement at the sites that are stated on the slide, and also the windows and ceilings and floors and associated asbestos remediation. Again, the school sites themselves are listed within that spreadsheet. And then the final tab, it's just all of it in total, all of it in one running list. And if you scroll all the way to the bottom of that, that will foot out to that $20 million of total expenditures. Okay, any questions on that so far? Okay. All right, moving along then. So the next slide in the deck, this will take you to another spreadsheet that shows you the budget status of the ESSER 3 grant up to June 30th. And so this is how this works. The column A is the category that the grant application actually requires us to indicate so that it can categorize expenditures according to the requirements of the grant. So what does that mean? Well, you may recall that one of the requirements is to have a summer school set aside, to have a after-school set aside, to identify any mitigation, COVID mitigation efforts as well by these particular categories. So those are what is stated in column A. Those are those categories as identified in the grant application itself. Column B is the budget narrative. So those are the activities. Those are the budget items that we have put into the grant. And then, of course, column C, that's the budget amount. Column D would be the adjustments that we've made to the budget through June 30th. The following column would be how much we've paid out of each of those budgeted lines through June 30th. And the last column all the way over to the right would be the remaining balance. So, the initial grant application as it was initially approved back in July of 2021, that is what is stated on this spreadsheet. Lee, if you could scroll down, and I'll tell you the row number, because I do have it.
And while he's doing that, I kind of wanted to point out that it was one of the initiatives of the superintendent to be transparent and also to make sure that the public is aware of what the expenditures were and where we were in terms of the percentage of spending in the ESSER grant. And so we provided the detail, we provided the summary information for anyone who is interested to know how we're spending this money. All of it's there.
Yeah.
Some of these items are way over budget. Are we concerned about that?
So in the following couple of slides, we'll talk about that. We will speak to that. Lee, if you could go to row 766, please. There's a highlighted line in yellow. Yeah. So on that line, and if you scroll back to the left, all the way to column A, you'll see that on row 766 in this spreadsheet, it says additions through June 30th, 2022, stated below. So these are the additions all the way up through June 30th. Those adjustments you'll see in the adjustment column, and so of course if there's an addition, that means something from up top is being reduced. And so when you scroll all the way to the bottom of this sheet, the adjustments tie out to 0. So that's row 822. So you'll see that the budget remains the same because we're not getting any more money. The budget is what it is in terms of total allotment. And the adjustments, again, through June 30th, those are stated below that highlighted yellow line. And so any additions, of course, would mean that there would be a reduction from the original application from one of those lines. And you'll see all of that as you scroll through it.
Well, I have a question then about that, because like the one right underneath the line is the internal tutoring, like the $35 per teacher.
Mm-hmm.
How would that take away from the line items for like a teacher at Benny? Wouldn't it be the same thing?
So are you saying that there's basically there's like overlapping initiatives is kind of what you're getting
like
at?
there's line items for like a teacher, a tutoring for $35 an hour line item at the top, and then the first line underneath that yellow line is the
district-wide
overarching,
tutoring.
district-wide.
Yeah. So I would put it this. Yep. Go.
The initial application was based upon site-based budgeting requests that came from the principals. And of course, there's requests that's decentralized at the school level, but then there's also some initiatives that are from the district level. So there may be some overlapping, but it may be different emphasis, right? And so you'll see when he describes this second sheet, that this is a budget document, a living document. It changes often as the initiatives change, right? And so we're tracking it on this sheet, but we want to retain the integrity of the original application so that you could see that, what adjustments are made, and then what additions are made towards that. And then he's going to speak to the application as it is in the current year, because I want him to speak to that and not me. But you'll see how we're tracking it even going into the current fiscal year.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we can get back to the slide deck and go to the next slide. So that, what we just looked at brings us up to June 30th. So now this next spreadsheet shows us the proposed adjustments for going into FY23. And so you'll recall that from that comparability documentation requirement, several school sites, we had to shift a lot of their costs into the ESSER 3 grant. That will be reflected on this sheet. And it is much in the same format as the previous spreadsheet that we looked at. Now in this case, I am aware that June 30th is a little bit of time ago, so we did feel compelled to provide the expenditure information through August 1st. So that's what's provided in the top box. You can see the percentages of what's been expended through those time periods, what's encumbered currently up through August 1st, and what remains uncommitted in the highlighted yellow line at the bottom of the top box. So the details that follow, again, it's basically the same thing as the previous spreadsheet. However, if you scroll down, and Lee, I'll tell you what row to go to. So again, we have the original application, we have the adjustments through June 30th, and then there's a section below that where it is the proposed FY23 additions. And so Lee, that's going to be on row 839. And that's going to be highlighted in yellow as well. So from row 839 down, those are all of the things that are FY23 requests that we're proposing to put into this ESSER 3 grant. And so of course, just like on the other spreadsheet, any of these positive adjustments down here, we're going to take that off the top. And now it makes sense to take them off the top because those things from the original application are FY22 requests. And so what we do strategically through our zero-based budgeting philosophy, through our site-based budgeting philosophy, is we need to pull all of that money back, as Ms. Polk has said many times before, and then we need to direct those funds and attach those funds to the current needs that are identified for FY23. So again, you'll see that at the bottom, all the adjustments foot out to zero, but just be aware that if you look on this particular sheet going into FY23, many of those lines, the bulk of those lines are all zeroed out because that's over. That's over. They've submitted new plans, and this money is now being attached to those new plans. The second tab on this spreadsheet, just a simple pie chart of basically the information that's stated through August 1st at the top of the first tab. So with that said, thank you for looking at thousands of lines of spreadsheet with me. I know it's always enthralling to do so. Does anyone have any questions?
Mr. Cheng, as you said, it's looking through a lot of things, but in a simple form, is there money that we're putting aside for the counseling needs that we've heard again and again? And is that reflected anywhere in here that you can show us? Because our students are going to need, COVID is still going to be with us, and we know, the violence in our society. There's, things that are going on in our world today, in our community. Our kids are still going to need social programming, and how is that being reflected in here? Is there any way you can show me that we're putting some of that $30 million that's left into that need that our kids have? other school districts, when I read about, in the newspaper, I hear that they are putting money into more social programming for kids, whatever you're going to call it. I guess in all these figures, I can't see that. Can you show me where that is?
Sure. So, as one point to note is that the ESSER 3, it's only a portion of the overall district budget. So, if you want to look at the whole district budget, that would be on the spreadsheets that have been shared previously that were presented in budget workshops 2 and 1.
Okay.
So, you'll see some of those costs in here in ESSER 3, but certainly not all of them, because it's not the entirety of the budget. Does that?
And when I was somewhat confused by the charts, because I was looking at programming, after school programming at Benny and other places, but it so much was budgeted, but then it looked like it wasn't spent. So I was confused by the spending category. Has it all been spent? What was proposed? Because all these social programs for kids after school are so important.
I'll speak from a financial perspective, and certainly you can.
Do you want me to? Yeah, I can. We actually just, we spoke about this today. We did budget those monies, and we presented last year actually around this time. One example is on tutoring, which was mentioned by another board member. But part of it was we couldn't find folks to take those hours. Right. So we had a lot of people that were not doing it because of family obligations and other things. So there was a lot left on the table. You're absolutely right. We recruited as much as we could. And then we also contracted for some of those tutoring services.
Right. And can you tell me about, and I know this is just, our counseling is so important for this next year coming up, and I've heard that we have vacancies at our high school in the counseling department. I know that's not, maybe you can't answer that here, but because this is a budget workshop.
We have some vacancies that we're working on. I can't speak to them specifically right now as in terms of the budget. And the question that you asked previously about allocating funds for social emotional learning and just to support students, I think we've presented several times on the services that we've tried to contract with in order to meet the shortcomings that are not only present in Waukegan but across the country with regards to shortages for social workers and counselors.
Mm-hmm. Okay, all right.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Ms. Gonzalez.
Sort of on that point, if we were presented that windfall, right? Like the 370,000. Is that in this budget? When we don't spend the full budgeted amount, or we catch a windfall, is that going into something else? At what point do we say, okay, we're not going to make it this year? Where else can we better utilize these funds?
So can I just, because we're constantly talking and adjusting and making sure that things are working, so we're progress monitoring. The group talked about that, and so it's a joint effort across both divisions to have constant conversations about what's working, what's not, what the spending looks like, and what we can do to ensure that we are spending those dollars to address the needs of the students. And one of those was also inclusive of schools' preference for how they would like to spend it. So giving schools autonomy. There's a question about redundancy earlier about tutoring, and that's part of the opportunity to give schools some of that autonomy. We also went through a very lengthy process where we went through with each school if there were redundancies on those spreadsheets and if they could be covered by other grants or through other budgets, whether it's from our central office here. And so you'll see that we've caught most of them. But when you see something like that about the tutoring specifically, just like Gwen had mentioned, it's not necessarily tutoring, it could be for another program. And there are some schools that do have their own tutoring program related to specific programming that they might have in addition. But most of what we had allocated was coming from us, and we did that to free up money at the schools as well so that they could have other extracurricular activities.
So I could add to that, everything you said is accurate. And so when they don't spend it, it rolls over into the ending fund balance, so we don't lose it.
Okay.
Unless it's categorical aid, and we work very hard, staff does, to make sure that we're expending all of our categorical aid on time and as it's in designated form. So the local money rolls over into the next year. But the philosophy that we now use for budgeting is zero. We start all the way over again. A number of years ago, we used to roll over, right? If you had a certain amount of money last year, you get that certain amount of money the next year. We don't do that anymore. It's needs-based, right? And so based upon those requests that we get from the schools and the requests that we get from the divisions and departments, that's what dictates where the money goes. The money doesn't drive the plan. The plan drives the money. So.
And the progress monitoring also helps with adjusting, so that if we do determine that we need to do something different, then we're constantly in contact and making adjustments in order to, again, meet the needs. But yeah, I mean, it's constant conversation, reflection, and progress monitoring.
Mr. Riddle, as you were talking, we took a quick peek. ASAP's tutoring and counseling funds is $4.6 million.
Okay.
That's just based upon our subjective categorization, reading every line, which again is published for you to look at your leisure. If I could do two housekeeping items and yield the floor. You were provided an item, I think it was item 2B, about new positions. That you've seen in budget workshops 1 and 2 has not changed. The link is there for you. It's about $5 million. You can feel free to go to that. No changes have been made on that. And Ms. Wozniak, I think you brought up the question about the $20 million deficit. That's the ISB document that Ms. Polk spends a lot of time putting the data into. And the system is designed to cross-check, it's relationally data-based. In the upper left-hand corner, you will see, I'll read it, quote, deficit plan is not required at this time. So we are not, from the state's perspective, overspending to the point that we are financially unstable. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Polk?
And my questions may be, I'll give time now that it's going to be under review, because they may not be able to be spoken to directly. But were there actual changes made to the budget after we received the survey, or are we still taking those into consideration?
There were some adjustments made, and the survey was considered. And when you look at the responses to the survey at the very top, we put summary, high-level responses to those based upon what the district is doing. And so I think that, I know that it was considered, and I know that the budget has been revised and is currently being revised, because the budget is a living document.
Right.
It's always changing.
With it being a living document, but kind of what I'm hoping, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Riddle, but part of the issue being when we say it's 4 point whatever we're spending towards tutoring, yet we as a board still hear that either tutoring services aren't happening or aren't available. So a lot of times we're saying, hey, here's the dollars and the resources to do it. That's an example. The example of the college positions that were approved in last year's budget, along with some other programs and programming that we budgeted for, we had money for, that we voted on, but we did not actually either implement or find the employees, because that's the disconnect for me, where the board is saying, here's the money,
Sure.
yet we aren't necessarily seeing it implemented.
So I don't want to contradict you, but we did implement. The issue was that at some of the schools, the number of employees that we could hire locally at each individual unit it varied from building to building. So we had, if you remember, we used paper, which was on demand. It was a point of service, one issue kind of opportunity for students to get assistance, right, with a specific problem at a specific point in time. And then we had varsity tutors. And varsity tutors was small group tutoring, it was online, and we didn't approve it until later on. So it didn't get going until December. I brought it to the board in May of last year, didn't get approved until late September. The implementation and planning was October and November, and then it actually kicked off in December. We evaluated it. Part of what I was discussing was the fact, is it effective? Was it working? We polled the principals to talk about how well they received it. They did not like it. We discontinued our relationship with varsity tutors this summer. We're looking at other opportunities. We're continuing with paper. We want to also expand the opportunities we have at each school, but they were implemented. Everything that we had budgeted was implemented. We didn't spend the money, because as much of the money as we would have liked to, because varsity tutors, we started later than expected, and we did not want to continue. They asked us to extend the contract to December. We debated, we looked at the data, and we said we weren't going to do that, that we were going to, we're vetting other partners right now to assist with tutoring. And we're adjusting the strategy as well to be more focused on individual tutoring, one-on-one tutoring, and that's what we're looking at. And expanding the opportunities we have in the schools. We anticipate that we'll have more people take advantage of that working after school. We know that this year was really difficult. We had a lot of people that were impacted by COVID and had issues at home, and that was some of the feedback that we had on that. But every plan that we scheduled, budgeted for, had approved, we did implement.
Okay. Can I have
Mr. Riddle.
just one more question, real quick question. Again, I read in the newspaper that schools they don't know what's going to happen, with these new variants, and some of them are setting aside money and contracting with companies for testing. We talked about that. I don't know that we've done it. And is there anywhere in our budget that we're putting monies aside to do that? If indeed this, the variants come along and we have mass kids, bombing out of school because they look like they have COVID symptoms, do we have any of these, or are we putting money in, or do we think that's valuable, to contract with some companies? I know CPS, it mentioned
I heard that too,
spending
yeah.
huge amounts, that they've contracted for testing, immediate testing, so they can check and see and send this kid home if he's positive, to try to keep the schools open if indeed these variants hit heavy in the fall.
Yeah. I'm going to ask Deputy Moten to come up and speak to that. You're referencing testing for COVID, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's
So,
right.
yeah, just to be clear. So, yeah, I'm going to ask Deputy Moten to come up.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Riddle. So we currently have a partnership with Achieve Health Management for COVID testing. I know we just recently updated our Board of Education policy. Previously, we had, if you're not fully vaccinated, you needed to test once a week if we were in the red. But we still have that partnership. They're available to us. They work in concert with our nursing staff, so we can have immediate testing available, and we do have test kits on site within the district currently.
For students?
For students and staff.
For students and staff, okay. All right, so we do have a contract out there that we can still access and use. All right.
Yes, and we have utilized
is that
them.
what we're going to do is similar to what Chicago is doing, or CPS?
Yeah,
I mean, as a child is exhibiting some symptoms, I mean, we're going to actually hit them with a test, and we have the right to do that if they agree, or is that just in the high school, or is that in the grade schools, or where?
So we have the tests available to us. I want to make sure I'm clear I'm understanding your question, because we did ask individuals to opt in, opt out. We have the information on Crisis Go, and this is the testing agency that has direct access to Crisis Go information to upload results and things like that. So we have the tests available to us. Our nurses have assisted with that endeavor, but we've also brought in testing agency as well as diagnostics so they could run results immediately for us, and that's the program that we implemented last spring. We do need to have some further conversations regarding the changes to the policy and how that impacts our testing, but we have tests physically in district that we're prepared to use as needed for students and staff. And obviously, we're still in the midst of COVID right now. So even though we recently updated our policy and the world is trying to get back to some normalcy, we want to make sure that we're still considering the health and safety of our staff, students, and regular visitors to the building.
Okay.
But we do have tests on hand, and we do still have the partnership and the ability to turn around those test results optimally in 48 to 72 hours.
Okay, so but one of the things I was hearing last year when people, was that, Mr. Moulton, was the fact that kids were getting sent home and told they couldn't come back if they'd been in close contact, and they had no symptoms, and yet they had to sit home for a week. And I'm just wondering if we have those tests available, are we considering that test to stay that some of the schools were using, but we were not? That a kid could say, yeah, I'm going to test. I don't believe I have COVID. I may have a little sniffle, but I don't have, I want to stay. Are we considering that test to stay? And is it a big enough contract that we have enough tests available to do that sort of thing?
Yes, so we have plenty of tests available. I believe our first order was 1,000 tests, but I believe that we might need to bring some information back because we did update our policy and our mitigation table to address if this happens, this is what you do. So as it relates to close contacts or quarantining, it clearly specifies what the requirements are, and it also differentiates if you're vaccinated, unvaccinated, because we want to make sure that we're not removing individuals from the learning environment if they don't need to be.
Right. I think we have to really consider that because I see a possibility of a.
I think that's, we both agree that's a good point to make sure there's a clarification because it looks different than it did in the spring.
Right.
It's far different, yes.
Yeah, we see our president. We see people that have been vaccinated who are coming up positive.
Right.
And what they're doing is they're testing, and if they test positive again, you send them home or he isolates. I just think we need to be prepared to do that because that's going to happen.
We'll follow up next week at the board meeting on this. Yeah. It's a good point. Thank you.
Yeah.
We'll just bring this to the COVID-19 team. LeBaron, I believe, so I know Nick's not here, but I know he's watching, so make sure this is one of the topics on the agenda.
Yes. We'll be meeting Thursday, so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I know that's a little bit off track, but it's a concern I have.
No, it's important.
Subject to additional questions, we're done with our presentation.
Can I ask one final question, maybe?
Go ahead, Ms. Gonzalez.
I kind of wanted to flip it on its head a little bit because I feel like a lot of the board, we give feedback, we sort of retell what we've been hearing, or we sort of set like the goals, right? The outcomes that we want to see as a team. Is there anything that in the finance department or among the administration that you really see being the goal for this year, using the funds that we have available? Like what do you think are the crowning achievements of this budget, and how do you see it improving over time?
That's a loaded question.
I mean, because if reflection is a part of that process, I kind of want to hear it. Like I really value what you guys have because you're the experts.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I think one of the things that, especially with last year, was that it allowed us some flexibility in terms of how to craft things like summer school and providing greater autonomy, and also our ability to really seek out input from stakeholders about what they want. So one of the things moving forward that we're doing, I think a lot of these innovations and a lot of what you're speaking to about kind of thinking outside of the box, you can see that's incorporated into the high school transformation plan. So one of those pieces, one of those components, especially related to CTE, is really, I don't necessarily think it's innovative, but I think we're really spending more time moving forward. Part of our plan is having focus groups and also having surveys to really get information from a variety of folks, not just doing it to go through the motions, but really taking a wider group of folks and at different levels, stakeholder levels, right? So parents, community members, students, present students, future students. So when we're talking about CTE, it's better not to start with 11th graders, but let's start with 5th and 6th graders, right? Let's start with their parents. Let's hear about what the interest is, not only inside the school community, but at the community at large. So I think some of those pieces really helped with us, and while we were doing this, and just to point out specifically, again, the autonomy, the creativity with having a variety, partnering with vendors, but then also having something locally based and having the ability to individualize it for schools. I think it lends itself nicely to the equitable piece where we're not dividing the pie in equal pieces, 22 schools, buildings across, right? But rather thinking about what are the needs at that particular school and tying it to goal setting, tying it to the school improvement plan. And I think the processes that we've put in place in terms of being much more collaborative and much more in having greater opportunities to articulate and progress monitor together are really helping us to do these things. But I think the budget process in itself, starting with student-based budgeting, has really helped with this.
Thank you.
Yeah, I echo that sentiment. I think that from the financial perspective, I think that I echo those sentiments because from a financial perspective, I think that the budget should be reviewed from a systematic approach rather than in isolation, right? What as an organization are the priorities? What stories is it that the district want to tell about itself? Because any organization should be able to tell you what are the needs, right? And what you could address and what you cannot address. Because we know that we're a tier 1 school. We're not getting all of the money that we need and we deserve from the state level, right? That's why we're tier 1. But we should be able to tell the state, we know that we need X, Y, and Z, but because we're not getting adequate funding, we're not able to do those things. We should also be able to, one of the good things about this process that we've implemented is that it's about equity, right? Because just because I don't give a particular school as much as I give another school doesn't mean that I'm not addressing the needs of that school. But rather, that principal feels that this is a priority, and maybe the priority is discipline, and it doesn't require a lot of money, right? It just requires change in practice and maybe some infrastructure upgrades, maybe a few positions, whereas another school may have, a huge modification of their practice, which has financial implications. So even though you might see those variances on the report card, because we have to report that, right? The per pupil expenditures, we should be able to tell our story as to why, this school has more money than another school. It's not altogether bad because you see that. But oftentimes when you see those variances in numbers, big and small, you want to say, okay, this school has more students, right? So they should be getting more money, but maybe that's not what needs to happen, right? And so I also wanted to talk about the ESSER report that we provided to you. Because that's a living document, you could see that just because they did not finish a particular initiative at the top, you also have to look at the bottom, because maybe they shifted. Maybe they shifted their school improvement plan and their focus was on something else. So we have to look at both pieces, and we wanted to give that to you so that you could look at it. Any other? But that's from our financial perspective, and I think that it's moving in the right direction. We're breaking down the silos, and we're addressing the greatest needs within the district. And I could tell you, when you operate like that, you remain much more solvent than when you're just spending money haphazardly, right? You're going towards a bullseye, collectively moving towards that bullseye.
Thank you.
Any other questions? We're done.
Thank you, Ms. Pope. I would ask the board to obviously review. We're now going to be asked to vote on this in September. So if there are questions, concerns before that final budget is brought for approval, please review, get those into the superintendent, myself, and also include Ms. Polk, so we can make sure that the entire board gets the responses. Thank you as always. I know how much work goes into this budget process, especially in an organization of this size, so we appreciate that. I do have further questions that I'll be following up with, but thank you all for the overview. With that, I'd like for a motion to adjourn.
I motion.
Motion by Ms. Gonzalez, second by Ms. Wozniak. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.